Well, we're going to get started with our evening devotional here in just a moment. We'll see who all joins us this evening. Sister Rhonda Shelby is already in the room. Good to see you. Sister Linda Dean, good to see you or have y'all with us. Now, just for those of you that are watching, I know that I don't always mention everybody that is joining us because in the setup, just a reminder, hey, Brother Leon, the way it is set up, it doesn't show me, hey, Sister Rhonda Briers, it doesn't show me everybody that is watching. And I know there's a number of people watching that it doesn't show me everybody. So if you are watching and tuning in and I don't mention your name, please forgive me. It's not intentional. I just don't see everybody from my view the way I'm streaming it at the moment. I'm going to try to change some of that up in the future to stream a little differently. Hey, Sister Janice, Sister Stacy and Sister Brenda are with us, Sister Peggy. I'm glad you're able to hear it tonight too, Sister Linda. Sister Regina, all the way from Fort Myers, Florida, is with us. Hope you're doing well down there. Sister Ruby McLaughlin. Sister Regina, I know you're in the Fort Myers area. Do you ever attend the Silver Dome? Dan Betzer's church. I know he's supposed to be retiring sometime. Don't know if you go to that church or if you've been to that church or anything. It is in Fort Myers. I know they've planted a number of satellite churches. Just curious. Sister Tina, Heard. I'm sure Brother Leonard's around somewhere. Good to have you all with us. And again, we will get started here momentarily. Hope you're all doing well this evening. We're going to be, Randy and Janice is with us. Brother Miller is with us. We're going to be back in John 15, at least for tonight. Lord, depends on what the Lord directs us for next week. But as of right now, we will wrap up John 15 this evening, dealing with the fourth element. Let's see. Again, if you are viewing and I have not mentioned your name, Sister Regina, you do listen to Brother Dan Betzer every morning. Wonderful. Yeah, he spoke at some of our district events here in the West Florida district a number of times and did some workshops for the ministers, and I really enjoyed listening to him. And we catch the Silver Dome on TV periodically. Just curious, being here from the Fort Myers area, I figured that you either certainly knew about him, and I didn't know if you had any connections with him. But we're glad you joined us for this devotion. I know some of your friends are up our way, so we're glad you're tuning in. Give everybody just a moment. I know Sister Jan Hammock will come sneaking in the back door in a minute. She'll be a little bit late, but she comes sneaking in. I picked on her a little bit last night, so all in good fun. I love to pick, and I pick on her a lot because she's fun to pick on. Yeah, Sister Regina, we do know Josh Bowman. We actually had him here with us several years ago. He preached a revival for us here. Kind of a camp meeting. Him and his wife were here. That was before they had children. Fantastic job. He is a very anointed, talented young man. So is she, actually, his wife. Like I said, we'll get started as usual here in a moment. And just a reminder, we aren't doing these devotions on Saturdays, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Wednesday night, regular teaching from the sanctuary, and then Sunday, the one service. We are looking to, we are making plans and trying to pray our way through figuring out what the next step will be as far as us getting back into a physical meeting in the building. Again, as I mentioned here several times, I can't give you a date at the moment. We're kind of just, like I said, praying through first and foremost and just playing it. I guess you'd say by ear, kind of seeing what the consensus is. Not that I follow the crowds, or not that I want to wait for somebody to give me permission, but I do want to move in the Spirit of the Lord, most importantly, and not be part of the problem. I don't mind. Hey, Sister Kathy, good to have you with us. I don't mind being the rebel and being the outcast, as long as I'm doing it for the right reasons and it's going to bring glory to the Lord. I don't want to do it because my flesh just wants to buck the system, so to speak. And that's probably one of the greatest battles I have with my flesh, is just wanting to, throw all this mess out the window and just do whatever we want to do. But I want to be led of the Spirit, most importantly. Just a moment or two. Don't have quite everybody. But we are going to get started here anyway, momentarily. Well, let's go ahead and get started. How about that? We'll let everybody else catch up. John chapter number 15. This is where we've been studying. Hey, Brother Matt. This is where we've been studying this week. And let me just read the beginning parts of John 15 again. Get our bearings and be thinking. I'm gonna quiz you in just a moment. Sister Jan, you have joined us. I told the group a minute ago you'd come sneaking in the back door, and so we're glad you're here. John 15 verse 1. I am the true vine, and my Father is the husbandman. Every branch in me that beareth not fruit he taketh away, and every branch that beareth fruit he purgeth it. Why? That it may bring forth more fruit. Now you are clean through the word which I have spoken to you. Abide in me, verse number 4, and I in you, as the branch cannot bear fruit of itself except it abide in the vine. No more can you except you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. He that abideth in me and I in him, the same bringeth forth much fruit. For without me you can do nothing. Hey, Sister Cindy. Verse 6, if a man abide not in me, he is cast forth as a branch and is withered, and men gather them and cast them into the fire, and they are burned. If you abide in me, and my words, hey, Sister Linda, and my words abide in you, you shall ask what you will, and it shall be done to you. Herein is my Father glorified. This verse, verse 8, is going to be important tonight. Herein is my Father glorified, that you bear much fruit, so shall you be my disciples. Now, we are talking, hey, Sister Donna, let me just reiterate real fast. I know there's a number somewhere around, I think, 20 that are viewing right now. Not all of those pop up on my screen, so if I've not mentioned your name, and along the process of this devotion, if I don't call your name out, please forgive me. It is not intentional. I try to catch everybody that scrolls by on my comments. If I'm not mentioning your name and you want us to know, I mean, I can go back and look at statistics later to see who was here. But I hate leaving people out. I don't want to hurt anybody in that regard. So if you're not sure if I know you're here or not, you don't have to make it known you're here. We want you just to be blessed by the word. But if you want to just make a comment, say hi, we'll try to make sure we say hey to you as well. So we're talking about John 15. We've been talking about for these 4 days of devotions this week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, tonight, with 4 elements of John 15. I want to quiz you again. I've been kind of doing this. We've got the Vaughns. I'm guessing Brother Glenn is there, Sister Shelley, probably together watching, and I'm glad y'all are with us. And let me give you a little bit of a quiz. There are 3 elements. So far, we have dealt with the husbandman, the true vine, the branches last night. Tonight, we're going to deal with the 4th and final. But the first 3 Let me ask you and just quiz you, and you can answer through the comments. Sometimes it don't, there's several people, so it may show up a little bit late on my end. But what was the key word concerning the husbandman, the father? If you remember it, just make a comment. Hey, Sister Joanne, good to have you with us. What was the key word that we wanted to remember when Jesus called the father the husbandman? It was one word that, yes, Sister Kathy Edens, you were the first that it popped up. Sister Donna right there with her. Ownership. The Father owns the vineyard. We are accountable and responsible to the Father. Sister Peggy, my goodness. Sister Peggy is an overachiever. She has already went ahead and listed. Good job, Sister Stacy. You got the ownership part. It popped up. Sister Linda. Sister Peggy is an overachiever. Sister Rhonda, thank you. Sister Peggy has already answered for everybody for the next three. So the first one with the husbandman is ownership. The second one dealing with the true vine is leadership. And the third one is discipleship. Jesus said, I am the true vine, my Father's the husbandman. The husbandman owns the vineyard. The husbandman is the one that planted the vine, planted Jesus. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. John 3:16, of course. The husbandman, the Father, planted the vine in this earth. Isaiah 53, of course, talks about that Jesus is a root out of a dry ground. He came not to take from. He said, I didn't come to be ministered to, but to minister and to give his life a ransom for many, is what the scripture said. So you've got the ownership of the Father. He planted the true vine. The true vine was planted to give spiritual, eternal leadership, and we must be connected to that vine. So the third element we dealt with last night is the branches. We are the branches. Jesus said, you are the branches. Verse number 5. That's fairly obvious. That's you and I. That's any follower of Jesus. And what we talked about was that we cannot be just a container. We are called to be a conduit. We're connected to the vine, and we project the fruit. And I told you last night that there were three elements within that, or three themes or ideas that I wanted you to know. The husbandman, the ownership, he planted, don't miss this, the true vine, biblical, eternal, godly leadership, he produced. The owner planted, the husbandman. The leader, the true vine, Jesus, produced, because every fruit has to come from the processing of every nutrient and everything that's in that vine from the roots and up. And then you and I, the branch, discipleship, we project that fruit out of our lives so that not only can it be a blessing to somebody else, but that fruit ultimately is for the Father's glory. Which brings me to the fourth element, and the fourth element is simply much fruit. We've got the husbandman, ownership, the true vine, leadership, the branches, discipleship, and fourthly, much fruit. So what is my key word for that? And it is very simple. Worship. Don't you like how all them fit together, how that worked out? So we have ownership, we have leadership, we have discipleship, and worship. Now, was I just looking for a word that fit the pattern and ended that way? Not necessarily, no. I was excited when it did line up that way, but I'm going to show you in just a moment that God is, his thoughts are not our thoughts, and he knows how to line it out. It doesn't always have to fall into our little ideal or outline. I understand that, but I'm going to show you how that producing much fruit is a matter of worship, and that is what the Father seeketh. You remember Jesus said in John 4, he says, the Father seeketh such to worship him. They that worship him must worship him in spirit and truth. And he says in the middle of that, talking to the Samaritan woman, he says, the Father seeketh such to worship him. Now, so let's talk about that for a moment. Going to the issue of the fruit. Much fruit. Not just more fruit. but much fruit. Now, having said that, the fruit of a disciple is ultimately about worship. It is about the root of that word worship, of course, is worthship. It is about ascribing worth to something. When we worship God, we are saying, you are worthy, you are worth me giving myself a living sacrifice. Worship is not singing. It is not preaching. It is not all of these other things. These are merely tools and expressions of worship. But it says the Father seeketh such, in John 4, to worship him in spirit and in truth. Not necessarily that that it is in singing, though again, that is an expression that we love the Lord. That is why, and I'm gonna use some very strong language, not ugly language, mind you, but I'm going to use some very strong language in what I'm about to say. And please just hear me out and why I say this. We are beyond mincing words. We are in a time where we've got to stop coddling people. We've got to stop giving a pacifier to this lazy, careless, sissified Christianity we have today. I know this ain't gonna sit well with some people, but a lot of Christianity today is so sissified. It's like the world, the culture, that we're so worried about offending everybody that you can't say anything. You can't speak the truth. Jesus offended everybody. Even his most devoted disciples, he would say stuff that totally rocked their world. I mean, it just blew their minds. Say, really, you talking to me? I mean, Jesus turned around and told Satan to get behind him when he was addressing something that Peter said. Jesus, listen, he is either going to be worshiped or he is going to be rejected. And that position alone will offend the individual who is not in it for the long haul. If you're into Christ simply for a temporary fix or just so you can go to heaven, but you're not really worried about worshiping and serving him, you're going to be offended. You're going to be terribly offended, because even the most devoted Christian will be offended at times. Because that Holy Spirit, when he puts his hand on something in your life and you didn't think there was anything wrong with it, yes, your immediate flesh response is offense. You get offended. It offends that flesh. Hey, Sister Joan, good to have you with us. It offends the flesh. And I just want to tell you, we have a sissified, no backbone flavor of Christianity today. It is, you look at like when people, especially conservatives, go on the street and they go to these liberal areas and they start interviewing people. You see this on YouTube, Facebook, different things, and they'll ask them the simplest of questions. Doesn't even have to be anything that is very provocative, but just because it is not in line with their worldview, they lose it. They absolutely lose it. I watched one young lady who was a college professor, and it was at a specific gathering that they were having, and there was a conservative speaker, and all he was talking about was just statistics of how race is in America, what the gender issue is. He was merely giving statistics for the most part. And this lady, when they opened it up for questions, she literally said, in not so many words, should I say, let me not say literally because I'm trying to recount it. The gist of what she said was, your language is offensive and you are attacking me. And the man said, I've not attacked anybody. I'm merely speaking, giving you the statistics. And she said, well, that's hate speech and you're attacking me. Well, you see, that has bled over into the church because we, for so long, have worked hard to please the world that every time the world turns, the church turns with it. And so now we are so off course, much of the church don't even know where she's supposed to be. We followed the world until now we're in a wilderness and don't know how to get back. So what I'm saying to you, and I kind of got off there a little ways out, because what I'm about to say is going to come across very, very difficult to hear for some people. But worship is not just singing and going through motions. And I would go out on a limb, and here it is, and say this, that a great deal of music that is propagated today as quote unquote worship that deals more with self and what I get out of this than what glory he gets, I want to go as far as to say that much of that is an abomination before God. Why? Why would you say that? Because much of what we call worship today is so self-focused that it isn't about glorifying God anymore. It's about me, myself, and I, the three most important people in our lives. And it is not worship. So now let's come back to John 15 and talk about what Jesus says is true, pure worship. Now, ultimately, the fruit of a disciple is about worship. Now, how do you come to that conclusion, Pastor? How did you get that? Well, let me tell you number one. And I'm going to go through several little points here, and I'm going to try to not drag this out too extensively, but I do want you to hear these things. Number one, if we're talking about being fruitful, and I'm going to show you in a little bit why I say fruitfulness is worship, but it's going to take me just a minute to build up to that for us to really grasp it. The first thing you need to know, when Jesus said in John 15, he talks about no fruit. And then those branches they're done away with. They are removed. They wither and they're cast in the fire. There's just no time for that. There's no, the husband has no patience for that after a certain point. Then there's fruit. The husbandman, God, is not just settled with fruit. Remember, he planted the true vine, and according to a number of scriptures, and I won't get into that, we're teaching that on Wednesday nights about the name, but because of all that Jesus went through, because he suffered, became obedient unto death, even the death of the cross, God hath highly exalted him and given him a name above every name. Now, but the Father will not be settled with our lives just simply producing some level of fruit. Why? Because his Son is more valuable than that. His Son is more valuable than that to him. And you also, you and I are more valuable to him than just that. So he talks about there is those that have fruit. And he said those that have fruit, he purgeth it that it may bring forth. And then you come to the next level, more fruit. But then he goes on a little further down, and I'll come to each one of these individually. And then he goes on to say that the ultimate goal is to bear much fruit. So there's no fruit, more fruit, but ultimately much fruit. How do you even measure what much fruit is? Only God, only the husbandman measures that after he gathers the harvest and says, that's much fruit. Only then. So until then, I've got to be given everything I can in hopes of attaining that much fruit favor with God. Now, hey, Sister Kathy Hall, you're late, but you're good. You're still right in here. So here, dealing with John 15 and dealing with the fourth of these elements, much fruit. Why should I be fruitful? Why does it matter? Why is fruitfulness worship? Number one, I will tell you this, so that we kind of follow and know why as I get to this and explain why fruitfulness is worship. The first thing you've got to know is that God is fruitful. I know that sounds odd, doesn't it? That God is fruitful. We know God to be faithful. We know God to be a lot of things, but to say that he's fruitful, it sounds kind of odd, doesn't it? But he is fruitful. What do you mean by that, Pastor? I don't, you don't have to turn there. You can write it down if you're taking notes. Sister Abby, good to see you here as well. You don't have to turn there, but I want you to listen to these words out of Genesis chapter 1 and Genesis chapter 2. I want to go through them quickly, so you don't have to turn there. If you want to, that's fine. I'm not going to give you the verse reference because I'm just going to go through these pretty quickly. But I wrote these down today as I was just meditating and praying over this and how God kind of began to show me some things that I've really not paid much attention to. And for us to know why fruitfulness is important in our lives, we've got to first know that our owner, remember the number one thing, the husbandman of John 15, that implies ownership. But if we are going to realize the weight of accountability on our lives to be fruitful, we've got to know the one who is in charge is fruitful first and foremost. Now, I want to read off the action or verbs that are attached to God in Genesis 1 and even into Genesis 2 very quickly. I'm not going to read the verse. I'm going to give you the verb or the kind of the implication of what it's saying. Listen to these, and I want you just to notice how much God was doing in that first week of creation. Listen to this. First of all, it says the Spirit of God moved. He moved. The earth was without form and void. The Spirit of God moved on the face of that deep, didn't he? Okay. So what does that mean? Well, first of all, you got to know God was moving. God is not sedentary. God is not lethargic. God is not lazy. The Bible said he neither sleeps nor slumbers. The God that created you, the God that called you, the God that we've got to give an account to is busy. He is a worker. He is fruitful. He's not just saying, I want you to do something I'm not doing. When Jesus came to this earth, he got busy when it was time for him to come on the scene. As a matter of fact, he was so raring to go at the age 12. He's in the temple and he is questioning lawyers and teachers, and they come back. Everybody was marveling. He was ready to go, but the Bible said he left and he was subject to his mother and father to fulfill all righteousness, of course. But as soon as it was time, he was of 30 years of age, which was the time frame they were allowed to become priest in the Old Testament law. All of that, it plays into that, but that's another sermon. God is fruitful. He's busy. He's working. So let me read the rest of them very quickly. And I'm just going to attach things that God did with God, if you will. The Spirit of God moved. He's moving. God said. God divided. God called. God made. God saw, God set. What that meant, he placed things, the sun, the moon, the stars in the heavens. He placed everything. God created. God blessed. And then you come to chapter 2, and then it gives us, it's not all in chronological order. You get to chapter 2, and then it talks about, it says that, and God ended his work, basically, excuse me, and he rested. That doesn't mean he was tired, but it means he completed. It was a complete job at the moment. But that tells you he was working, he was doing. So he as a pattern and an example for us, he had a day of rest, the Sabbath. Now, but it doesn't stop there, because Genesis 2 then peels the cover back and gives us a little more in-depth look at how he created man. So then chapter 2 picks up with this. And here is what in my little notes, scribbling this stuff down, I decided I wrote epic fruitfulness. Watch what it says about God. God formed man out of the dust of the earth, dust of the ground. God planted a garden. Yep. God, the husbandman of John 15, planted a garden. God is fruitful. Now that's going to be important to why I need to be fruitful in just a moment. God formed man. He planted a garden. He made to grow all the fruit in there. Remember, he's a husbandman. He's fruitful. He formed man. He planted a garden. He made the fruit to grow and the herbs. He took man and put him in the garden. Then after he made Adam to fall asleep, he took a rib out of Adam and made a woman. Tell me God doesn't have a green thumb to grow things. God took a rib and made a woman. And she was knockout gorgeous, much like my wife, as a matter of fact. How do you know that, Pastor? Because when man looked at her, he said, whoa, man, woman. God did all of that, made a woman with a rib. God is fruitful, is what I'm telling you. Now, let's take that a step further. Not only is God fruitful, but God commands fruitfulness. Remember, much fruit of John 15 is about worship. You know it, baby. John 15 is about worship at the end. Much fruit. Now, why do you say that? First of all, God is fruitful and God commands fruitfulness. Listen to these verses in Genesis 1. In verse 26, God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness. That is important. If God is fruitful and he made me and you and I after his likeness, guess what he's expecting out of your life and mine? That's right, fruitfulness. He says, let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, the fowls of the air, over the cattle, over all the earth, every creeping thing that creepeth on the earth. And God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he them, male and female created he them. And God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and multiply. Hey, Sister Linda. Be fruitful and multiply. Not only is God fruitful in himself, but God commands fruitfulness. He said to the first human beings, to Adam and Eve, he said, here is the command, be fruitful and multiply. Be fruitful and multiply. Oh, Pastor, that was for Adam and Eve. They were in the garden, and of course, that was a different set of standards. But after the fall, that's not the same. You are wrong, because after the flood, when Noah, hey, Brother Steve and Brother Sister Mayu, after Noah comes off of the ark, after the flood, he gives the exact same commandment to the next generation that will populate the earth. They were already fallen. They were already dealing with sin. They were out of the garden. And he says to Noah in Genesis number 9, verse 1, and God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, be fruitful and multiply. We are created in the likeness and image of Almighty God, and God is fruitful. We see it in Genesis 1 and Genesis 2. God is fruitful, and not only is God fruitful, but he created us in his image to be fruitful in his likeness, in his image. So God is fruitful. God commands fruitfulness. In John 15, a verse that we did not read that goes down a little further in verse 16, says it very plainly. You have not chosen me. This is Jesus talking, remember. You have not chosen me, but I have chosen you and ordained you that you should go and bring forth fruit. It's not a suggestion. That's not just a simple request. That's a command. Genesis 1, be fruitful, multiply, is a command. Genesis 9, to Noah and his family, be fruitful, multiply, that's a command. John 15 and 16, to bear fruit, if you will, that is a command. That you should go forth and bring fruit, or go and bring forth fruit, rather. That your fruit should remain, that whatsoever you ask the Father in my name, he may give it to you. Number one, God is fruitful. Number two, God commands fruitfulness. Number three, God desires much fruit. Now, as I said, there are, within this element of fruit, there's four levels. There's no fruit, there's more fruit, and there's much fruit. Well, if you're not producing any fruit, John 15 is very clear. It said that it is good for nothing. It is cut away. That branch, because it's no longer attached to the vine, it withers up, it dies, and men gather them and put them in the fire. End of story. That's all it is. Enough said. Those that bear fruit, at least a little fruit, those that bear some fruit, he says, he loves it, but he's not, you're headed in the right direction, but that's not why he planted the vine, just to get a little fruit. Now, I understand not everybody can receive what I'm saying in this devotion, because not everybody is willing to pay the price. Not everybody is willing to be this devoted to Jesus, but we all must strive to be. He's not satisfied with just fruit. It says if you have fruit, the husbandman will purge you, that you may bring forth more fruit. How does he purge us? To purge does not just mean to prune. That is part of it. That when you prune something, you cut off the dead limb so that the heart of it, and so that the fruitful part of it can flourish and produce more. So you get rid of things that are draining the life out of the process. Okay? So if you got a little fruit, He wants to purge you. And to purge does not just mean to prune, but it means this. It means to remove the impurities. Think about it. That if you've got a little fruit, you're doing a few things for God, you're walking with Christ, you've got some desire at least, God will work on your life and put you through the pressure, through the gauntlet, if you will, the trying of your faith being much more precious than that of gold. He will put us through the pressure so that the impurities will surface. The Holy Spirit can deal with them, and then we become more fruitful. Whatsoever branch in me beareth fruit, he purgeth it, that it may bring forth more fruit. So, what happens when you are, and obviously only God can define where these lines are, what happens when you're producing more fruit? That purging process is still activated, because you and I are in the flesh. We walk and talk and live in this old body. We deal with the influences of the world. So there's constant impurities that happen because we're not perfect yet. We're not like Christ yet. That is the process of sanctification by the Holy Ghost. It's not instantaneous, but it is partly instantaneous and progressive. I was clean when I was made new, when I was born again. But guess what? Not all of me has been surrendered to Christ the way it needs to be. That process will be completed one day when I lay eyes on him. But until then, he's purging, he's removing impurities that I can bring forth more fruit. And the ultimate goal is much fruit. Now, only God can measure this. Listen to what it says, John 15:2. Every branch of me that beareth not fruit, he taketh away, he removes it. And every branch that beareth fruit, he purgeth it, or removes the impurities, that it may bring forth more fruit. John 15:4. Abide in me, and I in you, as the branch cannot bear fruit of itself except it abide in the vine. No more can you except you abide in me. He says if you want to be progressively, increasingly producing fruit, more fruit, much fruit, he said you've got to abide in me. You've got to abide in me. And then in John 15:5, he said, I'm the vine, you're the branches, he that abideth in me, and I in him, the same bringeth forth much fruit, for without me you can do nothing. Okay. Let's ask ourselves a question. And I'm getting kind of down to the end of this, so stay with me. Because I'm going to get to showing us where, hey, Sister Brenda Foster, I'm going to get down to showing us where fruitfulness is worship. Much fruit is worship. How do we produce much fruit for the kingdom? I'm not going to get into tonight what that fruit looks like. I'm not going to get it. We could talk about the fruit of the Spirit. We could talk about several things. There's actually 3 highlights that Jesus gives in John 15 about how that fruit surfaces. He talks about there's a power in prayer. Abide in me and my words abide in you. You can ask what you will, 15:7. There is a joy aspect that is fruit. He says that your joy might be full and that joy might remain. There are elements in John 15, but today I'm not going to take up time with that. But how do I produce much fruit? Not just fruit, not just more fruit, but what God, the husband, would consider much fruit, a lot. How do I do that? Well, can I be honest with you? I don't like the answer. The answer is going to be very hard to swallow. Hey, Brother and Sister Pittman. So let me show you very quickly what Jesus means by much fruit. You have to go back to John 12 to find what Jesus meant by much fruit. And when I found this, it was today. I wrote some things down earlier before today about tonight's devotion, but lately I've been praying and just letting God pour it in as he sees fit. Not stressing about studying over these. A lot of it is stuff that I've studied over the years, prayed over the years, but I just want the Holy Spirit to just pour it as it's coming. But God poured this in today and showed me I wasn't looking for this particular issue necessarily. But the Lord, by the providence of his Spirit, guided me back to John 12 to show me what it means to produce much fruit. Don't leave me. Stay with me because I want you to see this. John 12:23, and Jesus answered them saying, the hour is come, that the Son of Man should be glorified. Verily, verily, I say unto you, and here it is. Verily, verily, I say unto you, hey, Sister Cindy LaJoy. John 12:24, except a corn of wheat fall to the ground and die, it abideth alone. But if it die, it bringeth forth much fruit. How can I be in a position to bear much fruit that pleases the husband and the father of John 15? Jesus said, except the corn of wheat fall to the ground and die, it abideth alone. But if it dies, it bringeth forth much fruit. Now don't get confused with the symbolism here. Because the context of what he means is that, yes, ultimately Jesus was going to have to physically die to produce the fruit the Father had sent him here to produce. For you and I to die means that we lose our lives for his sake. Crucified with Christ, Galatians 2:20. But nevertheless I live, not I but Christ. To be part of the vine, to be abiding in the vine, to be in a position to produce much fruit that the Father's looking for. Jesus spelled it out in John 12 very simply. If it die, it bringeth forth much fruit. I cannot produce what the vine is intending to produce through my life if I'm living with a divided heart. So, I don't want to leave this part out because Jesus goes on to say something else. In John 12:25, right after he said that, he said, he that loveth his life shall lose it. He that hateth his life in this world shall keep it unto life eternal. If any man serve me and follow me, let him follow me, he says. And where I am, there shall also my servant be. If any man serve me, him will my Father honor. Now my soul is troubled, and what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour. But for this cause came I unto this hour. What cause? Verse 24. Except a corn of wheat fall to the ground and die, it abideth alone. But if it die, it bringeth forth much fruit. And so in verse 27, Jesus said, for this cause I came to this hour. Father, and then he begins this short prayer. Father, glorify thy name. Then came a voice from heaven saying, I have both glorified it and will glorify it again. The people therefore stood by and heard it, said that it thundered. Others said an angel spake to him. And Jesus answered and said, the voice came not because of me, but for your sakes. Now is the judgment of this world. Now shall the prince of this world be cast out. And here it is. Here's where we begin to tie this issue of worship. And if I be lifted up, and if I be lifted up from the earth, will draw all men unto me. This he said, signifying what death he should die. Now, hold on to that thought a moment. So how do we produce much fruit? We have to die for Christ. Not necessarily physical death. Hey, Sister Shelley, not a physical death, but I've got to die to my life so that Jesus can live his. Folks, there's only one life worth living, and that is Jesus's. It's not mine. My life, independent from Jesus, was leading me to hell. It's not worth it. The only life worth living is living the life of Jesus. That is why in Galatians 2:20, Paul said, I am crucified with Christ, nevertheless I live, yet not I, but Christ liveth in me. And the life which I now live, I live by the faith of the Son of God, who loved me. He gave himself for me. And then he goes on to say, so I do not frustrate the grace of God. So, taking everything I've said tonight, and now we come to how is it worship? The husbandman was an issue of ownership. The true vine of John 15 is the issue of spiritual leadership. Hey, Brother Joey. The branches is an issue of discipleship. Much fruit is an issue of worship. I'll show you. Fruitfulness, and this is the last one. Tonight, I kind of give you some points that we can remember maybe if you're taking notes. First of all, God is fruitful. We showed you that. Secondly, God commands fruitfulness. Thirdly, God desires more or much fruit, should I say. Then, fruitfulness is worship. Watch. John 15:8. The verse that I ended with tonight when I read the text, and this is where I'm ending this little series of devotions. John 15:8 says this. Herein is my Father glorified, that you bear much fruit. So shall you be my disciples. I think it's pretty clear. Herein is my Father glorified, that you bear much fruit. So, the husbandman owns it. The true vine leads it. We are the followers or disciples of it to produce fruit. And the much fruit, that's the worship. Listen very carefully. Worship is why we exist. Not praise and worship, not just something we define a style of music, not just whether it is traditional, contemporary, whatever. It has so little to do with music, it's not even funny. Music is, I love gospel music. I love worship music. Don't get me wrong. That's a tool and an expression. Music, yes, was a vital part of worship throughout the Bible. It still is, because it is a way of expression. But worship is so much more than that. It is about what is worthy in your life. If God's not worth much, you're not going to work much to produce much fruit. But if He's worth much, you will work much to produce much. It is why we exist. He created Adam and Eve. He created man in His image and in His likeness, and said, go, be fruitful and multiply. Herein, John 15:8, is my Father glorified, that you bear much fruit. How do I bear fruit? John 12:24. If it die, it will bear much fruit. It is about dying to myself. It is about ascribing worth enough to God that I'm willing to do what it takes to let the true vine live through me to produce what will please the Father. That's all it is. God bless you. I could drag this on. This really has just really excited me as I really come to the end of these devotions for this week. This study of John 15. I love John 15. I mentioned at the beginning of this that years ago I made a copy of it out of my Bible and cut it out, kept it in my pocket, would read it multiple times a day, memorize it. It was just so rich to me at the time. That's never changed. I love John 15. So I hope these are an encouragement to you. Good to see April joining us. You're very welcome. Amen as well. I hope these are a blessing to you. You're very welcome. Thank you. Again, as I mentioned also at the beginning, I can't see everybody that is on here, so please don't be offended if I don't make a comment, respond to you the way it's set up. I can't see everything. Thank you, Sister Stacy. Thank you, Sister Rhonda. Hope these are a blessing to you. Sister Donna, yes, as you and the hubby head home, we certainly will be praying for you. I know you're not interested in leaving the mountains, so be careful. I wish I could turn around and go back up there. You're very welcome, Sister Linda and Sister Janice, and I enjoy doing it, and I want it to be an avenue that we can all stay connected in the Word during this time when we can't be together. I don't know that I don't like this as a permanent thing, no matter what happens with our schedules and meetings. So anyway, I'll let you go. God bless you. We're praying for you, and thank you, Sister Peggy. And be preaching at 10:30 on Sunday morning. So be praying about that, and we'll look forward to. I won't see you, but preaching to you anyway. And we love you. Let us know if we can be of help to you. And we're praying for you. Pray for us. God bless you.